Alright, so it's Miss Ray here. This is our first official video of the year. We're just going to start with a little bit about what science is and is not. So this isn't about biology specifically, this is just science in general. And this will give you a pretty decent idea of what science can study and what scientists do not study. Science does have its limits. It doesn't cover everything in the world, so we're just going to go through a little bit about that to begin with before we get into biology as a whole. So science in general, we just have this little checklist to figure out, can science study it or science cannot study it. So science has to rely on the natural world. Science is always relying upon the natural world, and it aims to explain what's going on around us. In science, it's testable. It has to be testable. Science experiments happen all the time. That's how we figure out what's happening and why it's happening in the world around us. And we rely a lot on evidence. We have to prove something correct or incorrect. And it requires evidence. No one's going to believe you if you just say, hey, guess what I found out? You have to have evidence to prove it. It's like truth or it didn't happen, or proof or it didn't happen, something like that. You have to have proof. And it involves the scientific community. So scientists are collaborative. They work together. It's not isolated. It often involves ongoing research. So it involves the community and ongoing research. So one scientist might start one idea and another scientist will finish it, or they'll work together to figure it out. Scientists are very dependent upon one another. And there are benefits from scientific behavior. In science, you ask a lot of questions, and those questions are going to lead to answers. It leads to curiosity, and just these general behaviors are good to have no matter what field you decide to work in. Just being curious about the world around you is always a good thing. All right. So what is science? Science cannot explain everything. It has its limits. And it can only answer questions that you can directly observe using your senses, or that you can indirectly observe using your senses. So science draws a line with theology, religion, morality. There's a line there between what science can and cannot study, and we'll talk about that here in a few minutes. So just to recap on the senses, science can only study things that can be perceived through the senses. And so the 5 senses are seeing, hearing, smelling, touching, and hopefully you don't taste a whole lot in science, but someone had to at some point to know that you shouldn't, tasting. So these are the 5 senses. You have to either be able to directly observe using your senses or indirectly in order for science to study it. There are items that cannot be perceived or dealt with using science. So is it possible to perceive every problem using science? I hope that after we talked you realize no, it's not. They can only be perceived if it's a problem that's addressed by using one of the 5 senses. So, going through our list, earthquakes, you can feel it, you can study it. Viruses, you get sick from it, you can study it. Angels, science cannot study that, that's based upon beliefs. Cells, we can observe it, we're made of them, so yes. Flying carpets, not so much. So here's a little list just of what science can study. Stars, rainbows, cancer, dinosaur bones, flowers, music. You can hear music, so you can study music. But it cannot study things like mind reading, souls, witchcraft, or fairies. So just a quick activity for you guys to demonstrate your understanding of this general topic. There's a drag and drop located on Canvas. You'll go in, it's set up like a little T-square, and you just drag each little item to can science study it or can science not study it. And you'll submit your link right on the Canvas page.